I took 300 Minecraft players and put them all on a single continent with only one life. And I gave the players an official currency to trade with, to simulate an economic civilization in Minecraft. The crazy thing is, I did this experiment just to answer some questions. What would players do in a situation like this? Would they all kill each other, or would they work together? Well, the results are truly shocking. So I've made this video, not just to give you the answers to those questions, but to tell you the story of the economic civilization experiment. Consider joining my Discord server below if you're interested in playing in future experiments like this one. Now sit back and enjoy this epic story of the experiment. When I made the map for the 300 players, I wanted to spread the players across the world. So, I split all of the players into 5 different starting locations to see how they would work together. North, South, East, West, and Central. And everyone was trapped within this map. I also told the players that for a short time, PvP would be disabled, but after that, I would give them the complete freedom to kill anyone they wanted. I also gave them a standardized currency called Wix to trade with. And just like that, all of the players were suddenly spawned into their new lives. Starting in the frozen northern peninsula, 60 players spawned into this barren wasteland. As you would expect, they all rushed for the nearest trees and resources. But unfortunately for them, the only food on the entire peninsula was one cow. Naturally, when these players realized that they had no resources, they decided to embark on a quest, going in all directions to find a better place to live. Of course, you have to keep in mind that they did not have the map you're looking at now. Everyone who spawned in the north fleeing was honestly an outcome I should have expected when designing the map. But to my surprise, not all northerners were as disheartened.
Welcome to Sweetberry Town.
Sweetberry Town. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I like that. We're Sweetberry Town.
A player named Killcard and his friends tried to start a town, but the low population caused them to fail. However, this would turn out to be a blessing in disguise, as the time they spent gathering resources allowed them to sell those items into the server shop for Wix. You see, diamonds were just one option for liquidating items into Wix. Killcard made a significant profit selling charcoal that he smelted at Sweetberry Town, giving him a massive advantage when he did leave the north, as he was able to buy a few pieces of food, and thus began the mass migration of northerners down and into the western continent, where they would find a very different quality of life. In stark contrast to the difficulty of the north, some lucky players found themselves spawned in the densely forested and expansive western continent. This region was filled with flowers, lakes, and streams, as well as massive sprawling mountains that reached for the skies. The 60 players that spawned here recognized this land as an obviously ideal place to live, and so they began to form a settlement on the riverbed. It's interesting that, unlike the north, most of the players on the western continent immediately began working together, building houses and easily farming for food. In the center of the map, another group of players were dropped onto a rugged and rocky landmass, distinctively marked by stretches of these thin land bridges, which actually turned out to be very relevant. As they began to explore their new surroundings, a player named Mindless saw this land as a unique opportunity for a very specific purpose. Knowing that the different regions had access to unique items for Wix, such as the north with charcoal, the west with plants and crops, among other things, their central spawn location in the world would allow them to trade with any players from different regions that were passing through to travel. So, Mindless took it upon himself to recruit a small number of promising players that could act as merchants.
I'll make you rich.
But they didn't form a single massive settlement quite like the West, instead forming many small groups and communities with independent interests. As Mindless took the time to think about how to start his merchant business, this next group of players did not have any time to think, and looking back, I might have been a little bit harsh on them by giving them an unfortunate starting location, full of lava and fire. They were probably the unluckiest players in the entire experiment, as a lot of them caught on fire at the start. However, as it turned out, some of the players realized that their environment meant that they were rich in other ways. The southern players discovered that the bone blocks that littered the environment around them could be mined and sold as bone meal to the server for Wix, similar to the north with charcoal, but this was much more profitable. The players wasted no time in gathering as much bone meal as physically possible, carefully navigating the dangerous terrain. While some of them burned, others were making riches. One player, by the name of Krivy, was especially successful in this endeavor, making tens of thousands of wicks when most players at this point had less than 100. The last spawn location was in the eastern corner of the world. I feel like the players here acted strangely, as while their spawn location was relatively nice, most of the players split up very quickly and did not necessarily work together. I believe this land was so expansive that a lot of them got lost and no real single location was agreed upon by the players for a settlement. A small number of Eastern players, however, saw beyond the immediate struggle and chaos. A visionary player by the name of XX King and his closest friends saw an opportunity to build something greater. With unwavering determination, they sought all the trustworthy Easterners they could find and worked to establish a town that would act as a cradle of civilization in the East.
As an East player, my surroundings felt quite barren. Maybe it was because of the horses, but that's something I'll never really know. I thankfully stumbled across the yet-to-be-named Yeast, and I was almost immediately welcomed. I knew they'd be great to work with, and it seems our love for baking products contributed a lot to dictating our name.
Thanks to them, Yeast created some kind of hope for the East's future, but they're almost certainly going to struggle to grow their population much further than what they have. In general, though, the players spent most of the first day gathering basic materials and exploring. A few players started making houses, but for the most part, players were mostly concerned about not dying and gearing up quickly. Something Krivy didn't have to worry about, as he immediately spent all of the wicks he made from bone meal on diamond armor.
What's up? I'm better. I'm simply better.
So like, don't you want to join us? You know?
Not really. Y'all don't look like, I don't know.
There had been a few deaths so far, with casualties being the result of fall damage or monsters. However, that was going to change, as PvP would be turned on the next day. And with that, the server closed until it was reopened the next day for Session 2. As the sun rose on Day 2, the players on the central continent wasted no time in getting to work. Mindless and his small merchant guild began looking for a place to set up a small camp. As they were exploring, another large group of players banded together nearby. This collection of many different players had an attitude of being uniquely welcoming to any newcomers and started to amass into a sizable tribe. Both Mindless and this tribe scouted the area until they found a picture-perfect location, a high mountain with a grand waterfall flowing off the side. Mindless's group and the tribe started building bases on the mountaintop, and with the tribe's culture of always welcoming new players, they began to take on the simple name of community. As the community players started building a new town on the lake's shore, the merchant guild got down to business. They flattened out the land and quickly established a woodcutting operation to produce vast amounts of wicks. Mindless believed they would have a reliable stream of customers by creating their merchant business in this central location. Meanwhile, the southern player Krivy, who had a fortune from bone meal, was hard at work carefully vetting southern players and forming a powerful militia. Krivy specifically looked for players who had taken advantage of the bone meal meta like he had, meaning this militia had a uniquely high net worth. Krivy believed they could be a powerful military force if they played their cards right. But Krivy was no fool. He believed that his riches would make him a target. That's why he chose a desolate corner of the continent to establish a temporary base of operations. Inside this tall earthen spike that towered above the barren landscape, Krivy began dreaming of the world beyond the south. Few players remained in the north, as most had migrated southwards, pouring into the western continent. The players that did stay behind lived quiet lives, with few connections to any of the players they had first started the event with. The hardened northerners who migrated downwards left a trail of small camps and small communities that left a lasting mark on the continent. More strikingly, however, the most motivated of the northerners made it all the way to the western settlement on the riverbed, further boosting the numbers of the already populous village and turning the settlement into a respectable town. In short time, some of the strongest of those northerners found themselves in leadership positions within the village, leading both northerners and those native to the west. Among those strong players was Kilcard and Emperor Zarakar. When these northerners took control of the settlement, they renamed the town, simply calling themselves the Order. The native players of the Western settlement seemed to have little issue with these new rulers, as most of the inhabitants believed that the structure that the Northerners instated on the town would mean more security against any hostile players who would try to attack the town. By now, some adventurous players had traveled great distances. Iwaj's journeys and those of other lone travelers like him had a profound impact on world politics and available information. These travelers, as well as considerable amounts of communication that was happening on experiment Discord servers at the time, fostered international interests among nations. The sharing of information created some concerns, as it began to seem like all of the different nations of the world wanted to be the strongest. The community that had settled near the Merchant Guild's woodcutting operation began growing into a large village, acting as a sort of hub where many travelers passed through. One of the most feared PvPers in the event, Triple Lion, was a highly respected member of community. While a good number of the players were confident in their own PvP skills, it was generally understood that Triple Lion was in a league above the rest. Triple Lion's presence ensured that the village seemed like the safest in the region, and this led many players who considered themselves to be bad at PvP to move there.
Hey, that's a nice house you made there, Fortune.
Again, many other towns also began popping up around the area, such as the Jevelis, a religious town whose members preached about a deity they called Jevel, and another group named Los Salvadores, or their more fitting acronym LSD. The LSD players lived in rocks, and they were a particularly combat-oriented group. They actually openly described themselves as mercenaries for hire. However, by now, small groups like these began to make up the vast minority, as the power of the larger settlements quickly outgrew these smaller groups, as the players all wanted the unmatched safety and popularity that living in the big towns provided. Through Discord, Krivy was informed of the massive western settlement in a faraway land that kept growing faster and faster. Krivy quickly decided that forming an alliance with such a powerful group would be beneficial for his own dreams of political power and glory. So, he reached out to the leaders of the Western settlement. After a long discussion on Discord, they finally reached an agreement. Krivy decided to fully assimilate with the Western settlement in return for political power. Krivy and his men sailed across the ocean, bringing with them all of their wealth and resources. With their arrival, the population of the town was bursting at the seams as a massive amalgamation of 3 different cultures emerged. Far away from the order, the religious Jevelis town stayed at a moderately sized population, but their made-up religion was made fun of by their neighbors. LSD had recruited a few of the most serious PvPers on the server, and as they passed the time waiting for someone to hire their mercenary services, they frequently got into quarrels with Jevelis civilians. As these groups of players grew, the Merchants Guild's members began to make a considerable amount of Wix profits. However, there had been some unexplained murders in the area, and some of the Merchant Guild's items and traders were frequently robbed by bandits or even Jevelist players.
Do you need something? I'm from Mindless's Merchant Guild, if you need anything. What? Why?
Seeking to change this, a new faction called Targon was formed out of the players of the Merchants Guild, paid for by a few rich merchants. Targon sought to establish themselves as a stronghold of defense and military strength, and using their merchant enterprise, hired LSD to put down a strong rule of law with the hope of protecting their trade. At the start of Day 3, the residents of the Western City gathered in the center of the town to hold an establishment of a new government. To officially matriculate Krivy as the leader of the city, Krivy, Kilkard, and Emperor Zarkar rallied together the players and declared the nation to be called the Squid Union. They were not the only settlement to be having political reform. Across the world, elections were held to solidify power structures. Community democratically voted in Koniri to act as the mayor and voice of the community, while Triple Lion would be the shield. Targon developed plans to expand their trade to all corners of the world, no matter the cost, and a player named Nix Lunari became the new face of the organization as Mindless took on less responsibilities. The whole world was now at a time of peak efficiency, where players were working together to maximize their gear, houses, and other possessions. Inside these high-functioning nations across the map, impressive build projects were constructed, paid for by Wix income. At this time, the world entered what could only be described as the Golden Era. In the Far East, an economically struggling Yeast found itself offered a lifeline by Targon. Without nearby civilizations, Yeast had suffered from limited trade and growth. Targon offered economic and military support to Yeast in exchange for their unwavering commitment to a permanent alliance. Yeast's leaders eventually agreed, and soon after, Targon had assembled the most widespread alliance in the world. The Jevelis town soon began finding itself in problems. The issue of the Jevelis robbing merchants and murdering players was becoming a topic of debate across the world.
Yeah.
But you said you have proof of the Jevelis raiding you guys, right?
Yeah.
Concerns were raised in Targon leadership about the stability of the region if these problems were to continue. Koniri, valuing peace, urged Targon to avoid any unnecessary escalation with the Jevelis.
I'm going to have to talk to their leadership. This is setting a bad precedent for what we...
Targon, however, annoyed by community's intrusion on what they considered to be Targon matters, constructed a wall between the two groups.
Get your guys under control,
no, get off
and
the
then we
wall,
can talk again.
Our borders are closed. Is it really that hard to walk off a wall?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
I actually don't know how things got this far.
This is my land. I'm not going to leave my...
Anyways, Targon wasn't going to let community's concerns hold them back. You see, Nix Lunari saw the Jevelis situation as a perfect opportunity to make an example of what happens to problematic players and those who would threaten the web of trade they were establishing. The Targon diplomats called the banners of their allies, declaring that an immediate seizure of all things Jevelist had to occur. The Squid Union's leaders heard of the Jevelist issue.
I called you both here because Targon is about to absolutely wipe the Jevelist from the map. I think we should help them. Targon is then going to like us. We can basically do world peace right here with one alliance.
I don't know, helping out Targon would just make them way too strong. I already think they're like borderline gonna take over the world. I really don't want to give them any more support than we really need to.
That's why we should join them. Like, I don't think you fully understand. If they like us, one alliance, and after the Jevelists are gone, we rule the world.
I mean, everyone in this entire server already hates the Jevelis.
And
we might as well take out what we can.
Exactly. See, thank you, Killcard, because we can just kill him. We can just take him.
So, without much discussion and without caring for Krivi's approval, Killcard took a small militia of Squid players and rode to the central continent looking to proactively kill the Jevelis himself and impress Targon's leaders. This level of disregard for his opinions did not sit well with Krivi. Now, feeling like he could not trust his fellow leaders, Krivi brought together his most trusted soldiers and began covert underground construction operations near the town from which Krivi plotted something drastic. Calling themselves the United Jevelist Opposers, the formidable alliance swiftly traversed the vast expanse of the continent and into the Jevelist town. However, upon arrival, they were greeted by desolate homes and abandoned churches. The Jevelists had vanished into thin air. In frustration, they reduced the town to ashes and began an arduous search for the missing Jevelists. Killcard's men eventually discovered and killed the problematic Jevless known as Avery. They noticed that Avery had been making his way eastward and towards the town of Yeast. Players back at Yeast confirmed that they had also seen some Jevless players moving near the city, which was really strange, considering it was believed that no players resided beyond the borders of Yeast Town. Without time for questions, the United Jevless opposers embarked on a journey far greater than anticipated, venturing deep into the expansive reaches of the eastern continent. To their astonishment, they stumbled upon a peculiar town nestled deep within the desert. This humble collective, known as the Silk Vans. In their quest for a peaceful existence, these players had withdrawn from the outside world, embracing a quiet life free from turmoil, and extended refuge to anyone who sought it, which included the missing Jevless.
Listen. Can we just take a second to talk?
We're taking hostages.
I didn't do anything, please.
We should take them hostage. Take your armor off.
Take the armor off.
Please, take the
I didn't do anything. I was just
Put your hands
building.
up.
Oh wait.
Yu-Gi-Oh took these Jevless into custody and embarked on a march back to the fortified walls of Targon. Meanwhile, Krivi's underground operations had been in full swing for some time now, and he was looking to put his plan into action. Emperor Zarakar was undoubtedly the people's leader. If at any time Krivi and Emperor Zarakar disagreed, Zarakar would get his way. Realizing this, one thing was clear to Krivi: Emperor Zarakar had to be eliminated. Despite having a capable fighter in his company known as Requiems, who would gladly carry out the assassination.
See, the issue is, I didn't get leader, so now I have to kill a leader.
Okay. No, actually, that's a good plan. So if you kill him and you leave me out of it, all his people will go to me and I'll have a huge influence.
He had just one issue though. They simply did not have the combat power that would be needed to take out a leader of the Squid Union on a whim. If they had more wicks, they would be able to purchase golden apples and other incredibly expensive but very powerful combat items from the Wix shop. If only there was a way Krivi could get his hands on lots of wicks and fast. You see, the northern island had been all but abandoned. It had been a long time since Killcard's settlement project failed, and the few northerners that stayed behind faded into obscurity. But one player, whose existence was unknown to the minds of all players, had a different story to tell. On the first day of the event, this player had realized something about the Northerners' Wick shop that nobody else had. If a Northerner had bought spruce wood, they could immediately smelt it into charcoal and sell it for a very small net profit. Scaling his operation up hour after hour, day after day, this Northerner dedicated himself to building the most advanced and sophisticated Wix generator on the server, to the point where this player was generating nearly 300,000 Wix per hour. In other words, he completely broke the economy system I had designed. And he had plans for this unbelievable wealth. Sending messages to different world leaders with an anonymous Discord account, he offered up massive donations to anyone who would keep his interests in mind. Across the many leaders that he messaged, however, he had no real takers, with the leaders not believing his claims of massive wealth. That was up until a certain desperate fellow.
What did you want to talk to us about, Adderhoods?
Yeah, just, I'm very rich.
Yeah, I can see nice. Do you mind giving us your name in-game?
I do, unfortunately.
Do you mind? It's just we don't have any way of proving that you're actually rich. What do you want? What are your desires?
Yeah, so right now, I'm pretty clueless on the political landscape. All I really have is money, so, here in a second I'll give you guys some coordinates. You can go pick up a small donation.
Oh.
Just in return for this conversation.
Krivi felt like he struck gold, and in exchange for sharing all of his information on the Squid Union and his assassination plans, he was given the coordinates to a dead drop.
How much did he say this was?
Holy!
Inside this dead drop included nearly 50,000 wicks, which was plenty enough to equip Requiems for the task at hand. Back within the confines of Targon, the United Jevlist opposers orchestrated a spectacle surrounding their captive Jevlist. Despite the Jevelists' earnest pleas of innocence, UGO paraded them as if they were prized spoils of war. The UGO army, and even Kilcard, watched as Lunari would preside over their judgment.
Guilty or not guilty to these charges?
Not guilty.
Not allowed. That's just gonna get you executed.
However, to the more compassionate players of the region, the sight of the Jevelists locked behind bars appeared too drastic, especially since it was never confirmed if these Jevelists are the same ones that were murdering players, and to some, it was obvious that they weren't.
So, here's the situation, right? Our next door neighbors, Targon, just had what I consider to be a very unfair and biased trial. I do not endorse this behavior whatsoever. Also, their actions towards the closing of this border wall have been very... I'm not quite sure what to think about it, but I'm...
restrictive.
What I can't say is that I'm happy about it.
Many members of community, sharing this sentiment, repeatedly defied the strict border wall that Targon had established. They crossed borders to taunt and heckle Lunari as she tried to conduct the trial. Time and time again, the community players would heckle and then be forcibly pushed back by annoyed Targon soldiers. As this cycle persisted, it gradually wore down the patience of the UGO leaders. To spite the community players that were doing this, which included the leaders like Triple Lion, they gave the Jevelists a guilty verdict and brought them to a prison underneath their compound where they would be trapped forever.
That's a lot, but okay.
Back in the Squid Union, Krivy had equipped Requiems extravagantly with golden apples and powerful unique weapons from the server shop. Requiems led Emperor Zarkar far from the town to a large construction site that a Squid member had recently finished, under the guise that they were going to examine it and give their feedback to the builder.
Nah, this is based, like, this is a whole thing. I mean, it's super unfinished. Oh my god! Dog, we can talk. We can talk. Dog, talk to me. We can talk this over. Why are you silent? Help! Help, Jesus! Help me! Help me! He's gone crazy! Zarkar! Requiem! Take him down! Oh, I'm dead. It's over. Striker, what are you doing?
Emperor was a good friend. To me, he was my strongest ally. Today, we are mourning the death of him. He was
The assassination was a masterful success. Not only had Emperor Zarkar been eliminated, but Krivy was able to sway the favor of the populace, rallying the Union behind him.
He has passed.
You guys think a cherry bush can break a fall?
What?
Blame was simply put on Requiems as being a jealous and bloodthirsty player. Right as tensions were escalating between community and Targon over both the trial and the border wall, the leaders of LSD got a message from an anonymous Discord user named Mr. F. In this message, Mr. F offered LSD 100,000 wicks if they would destroy the towns of all nations of the world except for community. While it was an enticing amount of money, that task, as well as betraying Targon, was a job LSD was not willing to take. And so they informed Nyx Lunari and the rest of UJO about the message. While it was never confirmed who sent the message or who Mr. F was, the fact that the message was to grief all of the nations except for community left a terrible impression on the Targon leaders. With all that was going on, you could say this was the last straw.
I'm gonna have to prepare everyone for war.
UJO invaded community with their full force. Their military numbers were staggering, and the leaders of the village, Triple Lion, Koniri, and others, tried to cover the retreat of their citizens.
triple, get triple, get triple.
Triple, please don't die, we need you.
Nothing in the bar, guys. Just keep pushing him.
The community town was decimated, and most of the harmless players living there were killed in the invasion.
I'm not gonna kill.
Why did I?
Those that were able to make it out ran west and towards the Squid Union, which was under Krivi's control. Killcard was worried that Krivi was going to take in those community players as refugees. And so, to turn the Squid players against Krivi, Killcard revealed to the world what a few loyal players had been telling him over the past few days. It was Krivi that was behind the assassination of Emperor Zarkar. And exactly as Killcard was hoping, the Squid Union town erupted into chaos as those loyal to Krivi faced off with those who saw him as a traitor. Killcard rode to the Squid Union with his men and a small company of UJO soldiers to finally remove the traitor who had killed his friend. Deaddrop had expected this entire situation and paid Ewaj to privately escort Krivi far from the town.
There's like 20 people there that tried to kill me.
Yeah. I guess I'm just gonna protect you. I got paid 35,000 to protect you.
35k?
When Killcard eventually did arrive, he managed to stop most of the violence in the settlement, but got caught in a fight with a Krivi loyalist named Striker and died. Thus leaving Krivi as the last remaining living leader of the original Squid Union. A community survivor named German Words contacted Krivi, believing he was the last world leader who wasn't loyal to Targon. German Words told Krivi about how the invasion was a slaughter and tried to radicalize him against UJO. Krivi began to hate UJO and Targon, as they actually took control of Squid away from him. As in the aftermath of the conflict, UJO established a small forest within the Squid settlement, with the promise of providing a more secure life and a system that would not be hindered by corrupt assassinations. And now, the last major population center in the world was under de facto UJO control. There was no longer any town outside of Targon's merchant influence. But that didn't mean everyone was on board with their system. Deaddrop gave Krivi one last set of coordinates, but this time it was not to a chest full of money, but to Deaddrop's own base. Upon Krivi's arrival, Deaddrop, or Saint Valentine, relinquished his massive stash of wicks over to Krivi with one request: to create an army large enough to topple the Targon Empire. Deep in the snowy tundra, this small band of players had just one goal in mind: retribution.
Krivi, I want you to call upon everyone you know. I want every player you've ever met to be here, any person who's ever heard your voice to know this story. To know we must burn the Targon Order to ashes.
Squid, I know some of you don't want to hear this from me. You feel betrayed by what I have done, so don't do this for me. Do this for yourself.
To any community survivors out there, I know you are not violent people, but at some point, we must protect what remains of ourselves. Please, join our forces.
It appears a band of filthy criminals has organized in a far-off place vowing our destruction. They are led by players with no real principles and murderers with only greed on their mind. They want to destroy what we have built, to take what you have bled for, and you will not let them do that.
The world wishes to cast a shadow on us. These players will look for any excuse to make us the villain. But you have seen the safety and prosperity that we have built for those who believe in us. Stand with us today.
The Retribution force slowly grew in numbers. Players from the far reaches of the world sympathized with their story. Suddenly, the world's great superpower that had before been unmatched was now being highly questioned by the average player. The whole world hung in the balance. Should they stand aside and watch as Targon finally solidifies their grasp over the whole world? Or will they gamble everything on an uncertain future with this ragtag group of revolutionaries? Eventually, the Retribution force amassed into a fully sized army. And then, unannounced, the most feared Javelist players showed up to fight alongside the group. While some players had their reservations about working with obvious murderers, they needed all the manpower they could get, and these Javelists were truly dangerous in combat. Targon's allies fortified the keep. They knew an attack was imminent, and so they prepared themselves for a grand defense. With Ewaj at the helm, the Retribution army rode to the central continent at blazing speeds. And so, the battle for the world began.
This is our chance! With me!
Got him! Protect Lunari's retreat!
What's that?
I'm gonna kill you, Devil's bastards!
There's nowhere to run!
Somehow, they did it. The Retribution army faced heavy casualties, but in the end, they defeated Targon and their allies, forcing Nyx Lunari to sail away where her whereabouts would remain forever unknown. While the capitals of the UJO nation stood as ghost towns, a revival of the rest of the world was in the works.
We have won! Justice has prevailed. Today's victory is not just about overcoming an empire, but about reclaiming our freedom and our future. To those who have lost homes, and to every soul who believed that justice seemed but a distant dream, this moment is your vindication. We must always remember the perils Targon brought upon the world, and make sure no such empire rises again. In this new era, every individual will have the freedom to live their lives how they always wanted. And for that, we honor all those who sacrificed something to create this new world.
In the aftermath of the war, the world ultimately became a very peaceful place. The Western settlement that had gone through so many different leaders and names ended up with no real leader with the death of Krivy in the war. It became a very free place, and the citizens even had fun having bar fights. The murderous Jevelis had died in the war to the hands of some LSD soldiers, but the Jevelis that were imprisoned by Targon were freed, and they returned to their destroyed town, restoring what they could. Many players took this opportunity of a changing world to form new towns, living in ways that they always wanted to. German words lived in the quiet ruins of community, and players hosted parties and messed around. So, what is the answer to the questions of the experiment? What did players do in this scenario? Well, there was certainly a lot of killing and fighting over money, but there was also a lot of collaboration and having fun. More than any of that, though, it was incredible to see the complexity of the stories these players created. I could only tell the big picture. There were countless stories of individuals within each of these towns and all across the world. And I believe this was a good place to end the experiment. While I'm sure it would have gone on for longer and created more stories to tell, I believe we've already seen quite a big one. And I think I'll let this world end on a high note. Like and subscribe.